So I'd like to welcome everyone to this session. We have Guy Hanson and Antony Humphreys. We've heard from Guy earlier today, and that was probably whet your appetite, I would imagine. And hopefully there's lots more of you on the call now. We also have Antony Humphreys joining us from the RSPB, a charity or a NGO or a third sector organisation that's very, very close to my heart. I can't say whether you're a registered charity now or not, but yet I love your work and very glad that you've taken the time out to spend time with us and our delegates, who I know are very eager to hear about how things changed for you significantly post COVID-19. So I'll hand over to Guy and Antony, and once again, thank you guys very much.
Thank you, Andrew. And Antony, a real pleasure to have you here with me today. I think we've threatened to do this for years now, and great to finally make it a reality. Thanks for joining me. Right, so let's jump straight in because we've got plenty to cover. At Validity, we have literally oodles of data about email covering the world. And we've done some serious analysis over the last few days, last few weeks, to figure out what's happened this year. And that's gone into a great new report, which I'll show you in a moment. And I'm going to be talking about some of the key findings for the first 15 minutes or so of this presentation. Then we've got Antony, and he's actually going to be talking to us about the journey that the RSPB's email program has been on this year, and some remarkable parallels between the notes and observations from the disruption report and Antony's real life experience. And he's got a fantastic story to tell. So really looking forward to that. And any spare time at the end, we'll be taking your questions and hopefully providing some great answers for you. Let's go. So, as I was saying, since the start of the pandemic, we've kept a really close eye on global email trends. We've been drawing from the data in our Validity for Email solution, which, for context, is literally the fruit of our relationships with hundreds of mailbox providers, technology vendors, filtering solutions, etc., around the world, sort of translating literally into trillions of data points. And it's given us a load of really valuable insights into how companies use and people have been consuming their emails this year, and how some of those usages and consumptions have changed. So let's first of all talk about changes in volume and deliverability trends. So what you're seeing here is a graph of global email volume over the past 12-month period. And the section which I've highlighted in yellow is Q4 for 2019. And this is average volume for that period, including Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and the peak sale season for that year. If you follow the dark blue trend line, you'll see a drop-off in activity after Christmas, a sharp acceleration in activity as the pandemic started to kick in. And then what I've highlighted in red is the new normal. So this is what volume's been doing for the past few months. Unfortunately, I pulled this data before this year's Cyber Monday and Black Friday weekend. But what I can tell you is that it's a good 25% higher than last year. So definitely a load more email activity going on than was previously the case. And there's probably a reason for that. New piece of research from the DMA, the Data and Marketing Association. And one of the questions that was asked of consumers was, what way do you prefer to receive your marketing messages? And I think for all of us who earn a living from email, this was a very heartening response, because head and shoulder over any other channel, email is their preferred source of marketing communications. And drilling into that, asking consumers, well, that's great, but what is it about email that you like? You can see that, again, email scores very highly for factors such as relevance and trust. So it's probably not surprising that in a year which has placed a premium on relevance and trust, email activity and email volume has grown as senders have needed to communicate with their customers in slightly different ways to what has traditionally been the case. Now, of course, if we think back to last March, and as the pandemic was starting to bare its teeth, And we saw a spate of email activity, which was a little bit reminiscent of the last days before GDPR became effective. And companies were flooding the market with COVID-themed messaging. And that absolutely took a hit on sender reputations. I think, as you can see from this graph, since then, they've scaled back on these types of COVID-specific emails, ultimately leveling out at about 1.5% of all of the emails which we're seeing. And that's probably a healthy balance that subscribers are demanding. And while sort of many countries are now going through their sort of second and even third waves of COVID, you can see that the sort of initial huge spike in COVID communications hasn't mirrored those waves. What you will see is that the COVID-specific communications, which are shown by the highest lighter blue graph here, have consistently outperformed other email in terms of the inbox placement rates that they're generating. So let's not give the wrong impression here. We're not saying that the mailbox providers were suddenly saying, these are COVID emails, let them through. I think rather we've heard a lot today already about the importance of engagement. And I think what we were seeing here is that the mailbox provider machine learning models were quickly adapting to signals from subscribers who were A, opening these emails because they were important, and B, not complaining about them because they carried value. And as a result, more of those types of email were getting through to subscribers' inboxes. What stands out absolutely is the different types of messaging which happened almost overnight. I think COVID-19 was barely on the global map before March of this year. And the email world was following its tried and trusted strategies. And as you'll see in the March 15 word cloud on the left, and common eye-catching, engagement-inducing words like new and now and today and sale were still very much top of the list. Then the pandemic hit, and within 2 weeks, all of that had changed. And if you look at the right-hand word cloud, this was the new subject line composition. And the sentiment of messaging made shifts that we've never seen before at this magnitude. And suddenly keywords like coronavirus and COVID and important update skyrocketed. And the tone of the messages transformed to be much more empathetic, invoking words like safe and community in the content. So I think, you know, there was definitely senders who did that initial wave well. And, you know, we saw some great examples, you know, sharing that message of, okay, it's very different. We're here for you. We're here to help. You know, we're going to change our loyalty scheme so that you can still redeem your points, even though you're stuck at home. And that's absolutely persisted through to this festive season. And I think if you look at examples like this one from the Body Shop, going out of their way to explain to their customers, okay, you know, even while restrictions are still in place, here's how we're trading, here's how you can buy from us, here's how our exchange policy is going to work. And so I think the whole COVID messaging strategy has become far more about providing useful information and being helpful. And definitely that sort of 1.5% tail that we're looking at is formed of, you know, sensible and useful messages like this. Now, of course, when you create a spike like the one we saw, there's almost certainly going to be impacts for data quality because you just have this mental picture of senders basically extracting every address they've got on their list so that they can tell them what they were going to be doing as the crisis arrived. And what you're seeing on this graph is spam trap hits as we moved through late March, early April, etc. And so with the sending frenzy, mailbox providers were absolutely feeling the pressure too. They needed to strike a balance because, as we saw in the previous slides, users were demanding the content. But what you can see here is that as the world started blasting those communications to every email that they ever collected, that massive spike in March email volumes didn't miss the global trap networks either. They increased by 5x to 6x compared with normal levels. And when we talk about traps, there's 3 different types of traps, as many of you will know. So you've got your typo traps, which is basically the ones that are being captured with a finger fumble and getting sort of letters mixed up. You've got your recycled traps, which is those very old addresses which have been repurposed by mailbox providers for monitoring purposes. And then you've got your pristine traps, as we heard earlier, the honeypot traps, which have been deliberately seeded to identify non-permission mailing activity. All of them increase significantly. And but what you can see is that there's also a solid indicator that since then, senders have abandoned that blast my whole life strategy, and instead they're refocusing on subscribers they know are engaging with their emails, which is a good outcome. Now, it's just as well, and what I've done just to illustrate this statement is I've taken the two graphs and superimposed them on each other. And what you can see is the correlation between the peaks in trap hit activity and the corresponding dips in inbox placement. There is absolutely a relationship between the two, just in case there was any doubt about that. So how do you stop traps from coming into your program? I think it's all about making sure that you are capturing good addresses in the first instance, whether you're using a double opt-in process to validate the new addresses like Sainsbury's does, or you're actually performing real-time validation of the addresses at the point of capture, per this voucher example, making sure that you are only bringing in good addresses into your program in the first place. But remember that we also talked about those recycled addresses, those very old addresses, some of which get repurposed for monitoring. And, you know, this talks to your recency strategy, making sure that you're providing your customers with options to choose how frequently they receive their emails, and perhaps even taking a temporary break from your program is vital. And for me, this is a really nice example from a travel program called Travel Deal. And if you look in every email that they send out, you're provided with the opportunity to change your frequency, pause temporarily. You can see the options which they provide. And this is really great practice in terms of, you know, giving your subscribers options to make sure they don't become those really old recycled trap addresses, which you absolutely don't want on your lists. The third thing that we looked at was timing. And this was really interesting. Has definitely shifted as personal and work habits were adjusted and more people working from home is the time of day at which subscribers are most likely to engage. And where mornings used to be most effective, in the pandemic, afternoon sends have actually yielded higher inbox placement rates and engagement. And, you know, making the point that, you know, perhaps send time optimization was previously focused on the early morning commuters who were checking their emails on their mobiles and their tablets while they're on a train or a bus. Not the case. Not shown on this chart is a very interesting fact that as much as 70% of all marketing email is scheduled to broadcast at the top of the hour. And we even had requests from some of our mailbox provider partners specifically requesting that we speak to our customers and say to them, you know what, can you just offset the start time of your broadcasts a little bit, send them out at 10 to the hour or a quarter past the hour, and just making the point that by doing so, they would actually benefit from better deliverability and throughput as a result, while taking a little bit of pressure off even the big mailbox providers. We saw a very real example of this shift in timings, looking at Look Fantastic's email program. And if you compare their 2019 send time profile, when the vast majority of their emails went out between sort of 6 and 9 o'clock in the morning, a year later, there's almost a complete shift in that. Still a meaningful amount of morning activity, but their big sending window now in the evenings, and clearly responding to that change in subscriber behavior. The final thing that we've seen from our analysis is there's been some distinct shifts in important email KPIs like open rates, click rates, complaint rates. And I'm going to walk you through some of the things that we saw. So, as I mentioned earlier, it's not so much that the mailbox providers changed their models for allowing more email into the inbox. Rather, it's the subscribers themselves who have influenced the results. And what you're seeing from this open rate chart for average open rates around the world it's showing us that email really took off during those early stages of the outbreak. And it's dipped a little bit since then. I think there's been some natural correction, especially as volumes have grown. But this new norm for engagement remains high and healthy. And you can be sure that programs are absolutely, in real terms, driving a load more traffic to their websites than was previously the case. Similar trend with click rates. And if you think back to the DMA stats, which I started the presentation with, they showed what an essential channel email is for a world that's very hungry at the moment to consume information. And we've also seen some signs of subscribers becoming more selective. And what the previous chart showed was opens dropping a little bit more recently. This chart showing that global click rates have dropped by almost a full % over the past 6 to 8 week period. And so I think, learning there that brands are definitely getting more emails into the inbox, but that inbox real estate is definitely becoming more competitive as a result. And I think we've already heard plenty today about the challenges of making sure that your emails stand out in increasingly congested inboxes. And that's definitely supported by the data that we're seeing here. The final thing that we considered from our analysis was complaint rates. And that's the last signal I'd like to touch on. So I think almost everybody in our audience will understand that complaints and unsubscribes are two of the key levers that subscribers have to voice their opinion on content that they receive. And between February and September, subscribers consistently flagged more of the non-COVID, so not referencing the COVID pandemic emails, as spam, compared with the ones which specifically had a message like changes in operating times or refund policy, or even those messages to everyone from our CEO. But we are now seeing a shift. Starting roughly about September, that's the bit which I've highlighted here in the orange box, with subscribers finally starting to show what appears to be their COVID fatigue. And note how the rates have now flipped, with far more complaints occurring against the COVID-themed messages. And it'd be interesting to understand what's driving that. I think, if anything, subscribers probably want to see that if there is going to be COVID-specific messaging during the festive season, it needs to be about, how's this going to impact my Christmas shopping? How's this going to impact being able to spend time with my loved ones? And anything which doesn't meet those criteria are going to be deemed as less relevant and less value. Or perhaps it's even just that consumers are fed up to the back teeth of hearing about COVID, and they are taking out that sentiment on the emails that are sticking their heads above the parapet. So a few examples here, if you're thinking carefully about your complaints. I've always been a big advocate for positioning unsubscribed links in the header area of an email, like this example from lastminute.com. And when we socialize the idea, people will often say, but wait a second, won't more people unsubscribe from our program if you make the link more visible? Sure, they will. But by being more transparent, you're going to reduce the likelihood of them removing themselves from your program by complaining. And given the impact of complaints on your sender reputation, that's a good thing. We talked about snooze functionality, and this was a really clever example from Bowden last year, where snooze was not just offered as a sort of 30-day or a 60-day thing. It was actually made campaign specific. They were running a 3.5 week Christmas sale. And in this particular case, the snooze offer was, would you like to silence these emails? And we'll resume messaging to you when the sale's over, which was pretty clever. So these were some illustrations of how companies have adapted this year based on our analysis. I think, make no mistake, volumes are definitely higher, and we expect them to continue growing further. I think we've seen that these COVID-19 specifically themed messages seem to be holding steady at about 1.5% of the total. We saw that massive hit in hit peaks, but fortunately things have stabilized since then, and hopefully there was some kind of scrubbing going on after those very old addresses got hit once and then discarded. We've absolutely seen that send volumes and times have shifted, with greater focus on afternoon sends now and better deliverability and responsiveness as a result. And while there's still a lot of tolerance for those crisis-related emails, we are seeing that complaints are increasing, and I think senders need to challenge themselves when they send out those messages, specifically in terms of, are they genuinely offering value to our subscribers? Are they genuinely being helpful, or are they just more noise in the inbox and perhaps even having a negative outcome as a result? So that's it in terms of the disruption analysis. Now, when Antony and I agreed that we were going to be doing this presentation together, we ran through what I would be covering, and Antony was immediately struck between the parallels with the real life experience that his email program at the RSPB has been through this year. And I think, Antony, you've got a really, really interesting story to tell our audience that illustrates some of the points that I've just made. Are you ready to jump in?
I hope it's really, really interesting. I certainly find it interesting. So thanks for that intro, Guy. Yeah, I mean, as we've heard already, it hit us mid-March that something was changing, that something had to be communicated. We are a charity. We rely heavily on our supporters, our donors, and in return, we provide them with ways of being close to nature, which I think anyone of us that's taken a walk in a park or forest or down a country lane really appreciate that sense of well-being that being with nature gives you. And at this time, one of the benefits of being a member or supporter of the RSPB is access to one of our 200 odd reserves around the country, and we needed to start communicating with our supporters that actually, sadly, we're going to have to close these reserves. And indeed, as lockdown hit, we realised that people were going to be deprived of this access, albeit apart from their sort of allowed exercise that the government allowed us to do. So initially, we went out, like lots of organisations did, with a sort of rather large send to all our supporters saying, yeah, this is our response to COVID. In order to deliver that, we had to stop production on all our other sort of business as usual communications, and get this email out rather urgently. And as I'm sure anyone involved in any form of communications production, you put those brakes on, it takes a while to spin that back up and get back to normality. So we sensed that there was going to be sort of regular updates from the government as to what was going on, and we would want to be in a position to respond and share those updates with our supporters, and help them find ways to stay connected to nature during this pandemic. So it was decided that we would instigate a weekly update, and initially it was we already had a communication called Notes on Nature. It was a monthly email, so we decided that we would build on that, as it was a sense of familiarity, but we wanted to reach a wider range, audience base. The RSPB, we only email people with their consent. We don't tend to use legitimate interest or any other lawful basis. And so we wanted a way to make sure that when we went to this wider audience, that they would be engaged and wouldn't risk our deliverability through sort of unengaged activities, if you like, ignoring our emails, hitting the spam button, as Guy mentioned just now. Next slide, please, Guy. So as I say, yeah, the lockdown only came in that we sort of everything stopped, and on the right you can see our first, as I alluded to earlier, our first COVID response email. It was turned around in quite a quick time, and as you can see, it's very text heavy. We talked a lot about COVID and our response to that, but we thought that we needed a much more sustainable and planned response to that. As I mentioned, we had an existing email called Notes on Nature Monthly. And so this change led to the inception of a weekly update email. We tested sending midweek and at the weekend, and noted we got better engagement at the weekend. So Saturday became the agreed send date. We decided to call the email Notes on Nature Bitesize, as I said before. It worked with the branding we already had. It would be familiar to our supporters. We wouldn't get the sort of, oh no, not another email type response, which unfortunately charities are guilty of. And as I said, as time went by, we felt that people were getting probably, whilst the intention was to uplift people's spirits through the pandemic, keep talking about COVID and lockdown was actually sort of contradicting that. So we moved away from speaking about COVID, and as you can see on the right hand side there, as well as having a couple of sort of more editorial type pieces at the top of the email, we went out with sort of bite-sized chunks of communication to try and provide that distraction. Communication included things like what to do in your garden, how to bring nature to your garden, bird identification, as well as keeping people sort of posted on the work we were doing. Again, people support our charity because we're not just a bird watching charity, we are a nature conservation. In fact, we're the UK's largest nature conservation charity, and people expect us to continue our work protecting habitats and species. Next slide. So we wanted to, as I said before, we wanted to reach a wider audience. Our Notes on Nature monthly email went out to just over 510,000 people prior to lockdown. But whilst respecting our consent policy, we felt there was a need to open up that audience. When you do so, that difference between the 870,000 we see there and the 510, these were people who hadn't opened an email in 6 months. This was a rule that was brought in to protect our deliverability some years ago. And as a result of that, there was a huge amount of risk involved that suddenly hitting the internet with a disengaged audience could mean spam traps, as Guy mentioned earlier on, but also, worse than ever, upsetting our supporters who then turn away from the RSPB because suddenly they're getting emails that they perhaps weren't expecting. Next slide. But actually, what ended up happening was because we'd widened the audience, and as I'm sure we all know, when you go out with a solus email, a targeted email, the content tends to be very targeted and narrow focused to that audience. That's right. That's how it should be. In this case, because we were widening that reach, we needed to widen the content so there was at least something in each email that we went out with that would be relevant or resonate with that supporter. In the same way that most newspapers on the stand in the mornings have a variety of stories and might cover sort of current affairs through to sport, through to entertainment. That's what we wanted to do. And as a result, it meant that our audience were actually engaging with these emails. These disengaged audience that hadn't opened an email in 6 months, which, as I say, was our minimum standard, suddenly starting to open our emails, clicking through, interacting with our web content, and really enjoying the fact that we were communicating with them. And as a result, our Notes on Nature monthly audience grew from that 510,000 in February to just over 700,000 by July. In fact, that has actually continued to grow. And in December, we actually now send Notes on Nature monthly to 824,000 supporters. So that's an increase of 162%. And it's become the parity between those two audiences is so level now that actually the Notes on Nature monthly now goes to opened in 24 months because there is no differentiation. That's also meant that our wider activity set, so that might be our campaigners who relied on the opened in 6 month rule, have now got a much larger pot of campaigners to speak to, and again, same with our other specialist audiences. Next slide. When we actually conceived Notes on Nature Bitesize, it was literally, as I said before, the aim was just to engage our supporters who are now sort of stuck in their home under lockdown 1, and try to provide them with some well-being, some uplift, some excitement about nature. We deliberately avoided asking them for money. There's a uncertainty of jobs, people were being furloughed, and one of when we look at reasons why people unsubscribe from emails, it's usually frequency of email, relevance of email, and certainly in our sector, you're always asking us for money. So at this time, it's true. Charities rely on donation. There's no getting away from it, and we're no different to those to those other charities. We need a slice of that charity giving, but we felt the time wasn't right. However, we just in the run-up to lockdown, we had ran an appeal for Gough Island, which is a little island down in the South Atlantic, which has just actually received, as well as Tristan da Cunha in the area, just received a wildlife protection status. And we'd run an appeal to help protect the albatross that are native to Gough Island. And we were supposed to be going out with a solus email thanking those that had donated to the campaign. We were able to do so due to all the furloughing and things going on. So we decided to run the thank you in this Notes on Nature. So instead of the audience being those that had donated, it suddenly went to everybody, capturing those that had donated and those that hadn't. As a result, it pushed people through. People clicked through to the appeal page and actually donated, and we saw unintentionally £18,000 being raised. So yeah, if you were one of those donors, thank you very much. Overall, though, Notes on Nature, without really trying, has raised something like in the region of £43,000. Our Christmas raffle email that used to go out to a very tight cohort has gone out in Notes on Nature, and we've seen, as a result of sending it to 830,000 people, we've seen a lot more people take part in our Christmas raffle, which is really, really good. So not asking people to donate money has resulted in people donating for money. So that's really good news. Next slide, please. So Guy was talking about opens and clicks. Overall, when you send a very targeted email to a very targeted audience, you expect engagement to be pretty high. Otherwise, you're doing something wrong. When you broaden that audience and broaden the subject matter, you expect engagement rates to go down. But actually, what we saw was very encouraging in that. If you look at benchmark report from Campaign Monitor, if you look at eConsultancy's benchmarking report, we're actually above average for our sector and indeed for the email market overall. That encouraged us that we were obviously doing something right. And indeed, our actual click-to-open rate grew, which is my preferred measure. When I can't measure donations or actions, click-to-open rate is my favourite measure. So another happy consequence is that engagement with our Notes on Nature monthly edition increased by almost 10%. So it's had a really good knock-on effect. Next slide, please, Guy. So what did that mean for deliverability? After all, this is a deliverability conference. And of course, what is the point of sending an email if it doesn't make it into the inbox? I can't get that conversion rate that I love. So managing deliverability is as important as selecting the audience, producing the content. They go hand in hand. I think it's often when I talk to people about email, we talk about open rates, click through rates. You get a lot of people talk about GDPR. Nobody ever mentions PECA. That's a different conference. But the thing that people very rarely talk about, very rarely ask about, is deliverability. It is a difficult topic. And yes, you can keep the ICO happy by having consented emails. That's what we do. But if you upset the internet service providers and they don't let you cross their infrastructure into the inbox, you can send all the most beautiful created emails you like, but you're not going to get the results from them. So managing lists and sending engaging emails to people who expect and want to receive them is key to us. There's notes on Nature Bitesize, slightly less engaged supporter list had actually no detrimental impact on our reputation metrics, as seen on the graph on this slide. Indeed, next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier on, in the past, the RSPB had deliverability issues, but through a lot of hard work by the team in place then, and working along with Return Path, now Validity, we've actually been able to turn that deliverability around with an average certified inbox placement rate of just shy of 100%. Guy, I want to get to start 100%, please. So you work with me. Yeah,
no, there's definitely still work to do there, Anthony.
But when we have the 2021 deliverability conference, Andrew, I want to see that as 100. There's a goal. And during the time of during this year of turmoil, at a time when we're looking to increase activity to ensure our survival, having this level of support has been crucial. The exceptional deliverability that we enjoy at RSPB as a certified sender will have played a real important part in the success of our Notes on Nature initiative. So what's next? RSPB are very keen on carrying out surveys, and we had actually carried out an email insight survey in February, off the top of my head. And I must say, I failed to say at the beginning of this, I was actually only just in post when we brought in Notes on Nature Bitesize. So to go to the business and say, I'm going to open up your list and send to everybody, to these disengaged audiences, was a bit of a risk, but I'm still here, so it was okay. So we carried out a survey and we spoke to colleagues, including some rather vocal colleagues of mine. They don't hold back in giving this opinion, and thankfully they really enjoy receiving the Notes on Nature Bitesize. For those who to imagine it in all its glory, if you think about the I newspaper, anyone's ever seen the I newspaper that has its matrix of news, page 2 and 3, that was my vision for how this would be. You see a little snippet of content about what we've got here on the screen, corn crakes. When I first heard it, I thought that was a cereal. But, don't get your corn crakes and cornflakes confused. They don't like milk. Very hard to put in a bowl on.
That's got to be the tweet of the day.
Tweet. Thanks. Love the pun.
Sorry, not intended.
But yeah, you might not be interested in corn crakes. You might actually have more of a, I don't know, you might be more concerned about the construction of HS2 crossing your garden, or the building of a new nuclear plant down in Sizewell. Those might be your concerns. So if we just sent you an email about lovely, pretty little birds, that's going to detract you. But actually, by putting little bits of different types of content, it allowed people to basically, like a pick and mix, choose what they wanted to consume with. And it acts like a big funnel, because people then click through to those websites, the online assets, and they can engage further, and then we can take them on a journey. So, for example, we can put a little bit about campaigning in. Traditionally, campaigning emails would go to our campaigning audience, but here we can give a little bit of a taster to a non-campaigning audience and encourage them through to the website. And we've actually seen our campaigning audience grow as a result. Frequency, I said earlier on, quite often frequency is a big contributor to people unsubscribing. So we actually asked in the survey, one a week, 2 a week. I mean, at one point we did think we might have to send 2 updates a week. Thankfully, we put that one to bed, and our supporters backed that up by saying once a week is great. And the fact that our unsubscribe and complaint rate has stayed static throughout the entire process suggests that we got that right. And finally, what's next? Next slide, please, Guy. We've got a lot of learning to do from this. You can't do email and not use it as a learning tool. So we need to do some work to improve our click tracking and start to feed that into actually tailoring our email content even better. We've been able to, whilst our actual email volume has grown, and our sales, our ESP is rubbing their hands with glee as we've just renewed with them. What we've also done is reduce the actual number of emails that go out per week. So we were sending something like 69 emails, campaigns per month. We've now reduced that to something like 50 because a lot of the smaller solus emails have been swallowed up into notes on nature. We have a dedicated editor-in-chief who goes around the organisation curating content to go out each week. We are working with partners to do better things with interactive content and kinetic imagery, and we're also we're using this as a testing bed to look at our overall email maturity or sophistication to then drive our roadmap. And breaking news didn't come in time to put on these slides. I have heard that due to the success of Notes on Nature Bitesize, it looks like we might be getting its own TV channel next year and a dedicated landing page, or shall I say landing perch, if you will. Final bird joke. There were so many, didn't know the audience. Some of them perhaps not appropriate, but tweet me later if you want more. Thanks,
I think we want to hear a few more, Antony. Maybe they'll be coming through in the questions and answers. But seriously, I think that was such a great insight. We sort of started off positioning the conversation around this being a year of immense disruption for our industry. But I think, from disruption comes innovation and opportunity. And I think you've done a really nice job sort of showcasing how you and the RSBB team harness that opportunity. So thank you so much. Really appreciate you joining me and telling your story. So that was
I just wanted to say that it is a team effort. You've pointed that out. I have seen that there's a couple of the team in the audience here, and shout out to them for their effort and determination in working on this project.
Fantastic. So that's today's presentation, and just the link for the disruption report if you'd like to get a copy. So Andrew, I think we're ready to link back to you and maybe take a question or two.
Sure. Thanks, guys. I didn't for a moment suspect that. I mean, I know you said, Guy, on LinkedIn that Antony's going to deliver some stellar content. I didn't think you were going to go into that level of detail or provide that many takeaways. So I'm doing 2 other things at once here, and I'm glad we've got this recorded because I'm going to have to go back over it. Thank you so much, Antony. That was I'm blown away. Normally there's a lot of fluff, and it was just pure take notes with your sessions.
More feathers, less fluff, eh?
I think people are still catching up and absorbing the info. I haven't. I think people are like me, blown away with what we've already heard. What was the? I mean, from me, what was the biggest point of pain in all of that? And when did you think, hey, this this is good, we've turned the corner here?
Is that to me or Guy?
Yeah, to you first, I think, Antony.
as I say, it was quite scary because I was fairly new in post and sort of trying to prove my worth, I guess. And all of a sudden, I'm putting deliverability at risk. So that was a scary moment. But it's one of those things. Sometimes you've got to do something to make a difference. We needed to keep our supporters connected to us. If I'm going to be selfish about it, we need them to be in tune with us as a charity. But the main focus was to keep them informed. A lot of so we have over 200 reserves around the UK, and they're open access to the public and to our members. And a lot of people rely on those for their daily exercise, walking dogs, running, as well as spotting lesser spotted things. So I never did my bird watching badge when I was in the Scouts, but we knew we had to do something. There was a challenge between deciding whether we were going out with a service message or a marketing message. And service messaging, I guess, is a totally different webinar in the future. But do we send to all, or do we send to as many people as we can do for whom we have permission? And because we took the stance in 2018 that we would go down a consent route, that we had to curtail it from a send to all that our initial email went out with, say our reserves were closed, down to something a bit more in line with marketing permissions, because we do talk a lot about our aims and ideals. And I think the realization of how well it was going came when I was looking on Google Analytics and noticed that we raised some money from an email I wasn't expecting to raise some money from. And on looking at that, we suddenly realized how engaged people were. And it's, I sort of, why are people giving? We haven't asked. And coined the phrase GOMO, guilt of missing out. So when you get that sort of confirmation that what you're doing is working and that people are enjoying it, when you get colleagues saying, why is it getting into my inbox? And then you realise that they were one of the ones that hadn't opened an email in 6 months, because they get all the content internally. Mm-hmm. When it comes through from an external channel, they're not necessarily looking at it. So all of a sudden we've got staff saying, what's this wonderful thing? Why aren't we getting it? So again, further confirmation that we're doing a good thing. And then it's grown from there. The organisation has responded by giving us an editor-in-chief to pull the content together. And it got mentioned in dispatches the other week as being one of the successes of the year. So
so that content editor just your email?
Sorry, Andrew, they dipped out on audio there.
Sorry. So the content editor, that's just for your email program or email and blog?
Yes. He sits in our supporter experience team and used to be on our PR team some while ago, and he's responsible for our supporter communications. Okay. And our normal sort of way of operations, we have an activity owner who would then brief us a job, and then our content team would go and put all that together and out it would go. But this has become such a big job. It was taking about 2.5 days a week to put together, so we've had to put somebody more dedicated onto it to free up our central comms team.
Wow, that's amazing. I think that's the real proof that it's all working. That you've been given those kinds of resources. That's the ultimate proof, I think.
And I think that the further brand extension into a TV channel and its own web page, I think that's further confirmation that we've now got an opportunity to use this as I said at the end there, as a sort of a welcome, a landing page, a landing perch for people coming to our organisation. They find their way to our website through our other channels, they can sign up for this newsletter, and then we can use the insights from that to help people set sort of explicit preferences as to what they want to hear about, rather than as an organisation somewhat sort of flying in the dark, trying to. That was not. That, yeah. Yes. Flying in the dark. Yeah, it allows us to, as I say, learn from our segmentation, and really target people to where they want to be to help them engage better with nature, is what I was trying to say.
Yeah, no, that's yeah. I love the story, and I love the fact that you weren't afraid to experiment, or you were afraid to experiment because nobody on this call or listening to this session isn't afraid. But if you want proof that sometimes taking a risk and following your gut and doing something a little bit different might pay off big time, then I think Antony Humphreys' story is a perfect example of how well it can go. And yeah, I think people need to take more risk and try experimenting more and not be so afraid. So I salute you for what you did there, because email marketers need to hear these kinds of stories.
Thank you.
And Guy, what's your take on all of it?
I think, as I said when I introduced Antony, I mean, we wanted to present some of the most interesting findings from our validity analysis. And then, when I was looking for somebody to come and join me for the session, and I reached out to Antony, and I think, as I said, we were both immediately struck by how similar his story was to the one, which I was telling from the analysis. And, really great to see. And I think, Antony, it was interesting listening to you talk about, sort of some of the shifts in your subscribers' behavior as well. I mean, you were talking about how they tended to become more weekend centric in terms of their engagement. And I was sort of curious to sort of connect those dots and think that, especially while reserves and, sort of RSPB nature outlets were shut, was that then more time for them to actually engage with their online comms because they weren't going out for fresh air, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, there's you could draw that analysis. It could be that we're all facing being stuck in our house. We had so there were people, say, on furlough in their normal our supporters would have been experiencing furlough or stuck in their house. So I guess there's more time to do things, like checking your personal email. We just part of it, I think, was quite excited by the fact that we got better engagement at the weekend than at the week, because I wanted to develop this into sort of more of a weekend read, if you like. I want people to take the time and read it, and go to the website and read a bit and come back to the email and read a bit. And again, some of the anecdotal feedback was that people were opening it at the weekend, reading a bit, and then I've got some time on the train, or I've got some time here, I'll go back and read the next bit. So if I when I get the chance to sort of do some deep dive analysis, we might be able to actually see that there was a trail of clicks over the course of the week until the next edition.
Amazing. Is it just me, or have we lost Andrew?
Well, if we've lost Andrew, it's our party, isn't it? What do we do now?
No, he's back. He's back.
No, I'm sorry. Or if I wasn't sure if the video was choppy because of me.
No, there we go. And it was great hearing the deliverability story as well. And my cheesy contribution to that was, it was great that you were sort of very aware of not wanting to kill the deliverability goose that lays all those golden eggs.
Well, there is that, and also, I don't want to get my ear bent next time I see you. I'm very keen that I know that unsubscribes and complaint rates and reputation is it's going to fluctuate, but it's my role is to protect our list, but more than that, it's to protect the reputation of of the RSPB. And if I see those unsubscribed links being clicked more frequently, then we're doing something that our supporters a disservice.
Yeah, I don't think you got much fear of that. I mean, your metrics look amazing.
Yeah, and it's what can I say? Let's keep them there.
Absolutely. Right, Andrew, I guess all of our attendees are probably looking for a lunch break right now.
I think they've all gone for lunch.
I'm certainly looking for a pizza or a bacon roll or something. But yeah, thank you very much for both joining us. For the delegates that are around, some of them aren't wanting lunch, some of them have only just arrived from the US.
Of
we
course.
will be taking a break. You've missed an awesome session from Antony and Guy, but this will be available sometime after the event for you to watch again. So yeah, keep an eye out in your emails and we'll provide those links. And in about 5 minutes time, delegate networking starts, which is basically our version of sorry, this is the blocklist panelist. My apologies. We've missed networking. You've missed your chance for networking. Well, you can actually go networking. There's panels and sessions that are open. But boss has just told me that, yeah, we're canning networking and we're going straight into it's a replay of an Inbox Expo session, which had the founders or founding members of various of the block lists. So you've got Spamhaus, Serval, Embelliment, and others. It is a replay, but many of those people on the call are going to be available to talk to you later on in the day. So that's me introducing the next section and saying thank you to Antony, thank you to Guy. 2 incredible sessions from you now, Guy. Antony, I definitely want to hear from you again. Let's hear more about what you're talking about on the transactional side of things. I know this was a well-attended session. I'll pass on any feedback, and hopefully you guys can follow Antony Humphreys and Guy Hanson on Twitter because, well, they're just guys to follow.
It's been a real pleasure, and thanks for the invite.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Cheers.
Bye for now.